Hey guys, it's Rage. Today I'm going to go through some really common raid terms that you do kind of well to learn the definitions for. When you go into raids, whether you do that with a guild group, a friend group, or a pug group, you will hear these terms being used quite often, and if you don't know what they mean, you might end up causing a bit of an issue for your group. So, with that being said, let's go through the most common raid terms, and I will give you a clear example of what they are and what they actually look like. So, to begin, we have the first word, which is boss. The boss is the main mob that you need to defeat. It is incredibly strong, and its damage abilities hurt a lot, unless it's from a previous expansion, in which case you're probably a lot stronger than it. But a current content raid boss needs to be defeated in a group by working together, listening to a raid leader, and understanding the mechanics. Add. These are additional mobs that spawn either before a boss fight or during a boss fight and must be dealt with. Your raid leader will usually call out which adds to prioritize first, aka kill first. Eye level. Your character's eye level, or item level, comes from your armor. On each equipment piece is a given level, and the average is taken from your entire equipment, excluding your shirt and your tabard. That gives you your overall eye level. You have an equipped eye level and a total eye level. If the total eye level is higher, this means that you have something sitting in your bags that's a higher item level that you can equip. BIS. This stands for best in slot. This is the best equipment piece that you can get for that specific slot. Beware that there is PvE, so dungeons and raids, best in slot items, and PvP, best in slot items. You can also get better pieces depending on the difficulty of the content that you complete. Difficulties. There's 4 different difficulties for raids. LFR, which is looking for raid, normal, heroic, and mythic. LFR, normal, and heroic are all flex sizes of up to 30 players. Mythic is only a strict 20-man size for players of the same realm. However, all of them require the same roles. LFR is the introductory version of the raid and is the easiest. Normal is a step up from there, heroic adds a couple of different mechanics to the mix, and mythic is the hardest difficulty. Role. There are 3 types of roles: tanks, healers, and damage, also known as DPS. The DPS can also be split into melee, which is close quarter damage, and ranged, which is dealing damage from afar, and are positioned differently according to the boss mechanics. Mechanics. This is how the boss encounter progresses, and there are many different mechanics per boss. Some are global and can be recognized from boss to boss, like soaking and stacking and spreading, and some are unique, like your teleportation mechanic in Zymox in Castlanathria. Each mechanic requires you to do something specific, and usually your raid leader will call these out to you. Soak. This is a movement pattern that is required during a raid, where you or other members of the raid will run towards a specific player or an area to absorb the damage. This is a very important and repeated mechanic of a boss and must be absorbed by you or another player. There are group soaks where you and other members soak the target, or solo soaks. The use of damage mitigation spells is very important. Stacking. This is another movement pattern that's required during a raid. It's similar to soaking, but instead of absorbing a particular ability, you're standing on top of another target that's in a set location. Common phrases will be something like, stack on the healers, stack on the tank, in which case you need to stop what you're doing and move over to that target. Spread. This is another movement pattern that is required during a raid. This is the opposite to stacking, as you need to move away from anyone and everyone. Usually, you will need to spread if you have an AoE damaging debuff or a dot on you, which is put on you by mobs or a boss. If you don't do this, it could result in a wipe. Wipe. A wipe simply means death of the entire group. This can either be voluntary or involuntary. When too many raid members die, the raid leader may call for a wipe. If you're fortunate to still be alive, this means that you need to kill yourself. Wiping is not good and should be avoided unless your raid leader calls for it. And usually it's so that your raid can have a quick reset and move on and try another go at the boss. AoE. This stands for Area of Effect, which is a type of spell that affects an area around you. This can either be harmful or beneficial. If it's coming from a boss or an ad though, it's most likely harmful damage. Debuff. This has a negative effect on your character and usually lasts for a period of time. You can view your debuffs right underneath your buffs, and some of these can be dispelled, meaning the spell is removed by certain people, but not all of them. Buff. This is the opposite to a debuff, and is beneficial to a target in some way. Examples of a buff would be class buffs, like the mages can buff intellect, warriors can buff attack power, priests can buff stamina, etc. But if a buff is on a boss or a mob, this can be non-beneficial or harmful for you. Dot. This stands for damage over time, and can be both good and bad for your character. If you apply a dot on a target, then that's beneficial for you as you're dealing damage over time. However, if a dot is on you, it's harmful as you're taking damage over time, or ticking damage over time. Ticking. This is a generic word to describe how abilities will affect you over time. A tick is a time increment used for overtime effects. One tick is every time that effect happens. So for example, the spell Agony applies the following onto the target. It takes X amount of damage every second for 24 seconds. And every time the target takes X amount of damage, that is classed as a tick. Bleed. This is a type of dot ability that traditionally applies physical damage onto the target. CR or BR. A CR and a BR are exactly the same. A CR stands for combat res and a BR stands for a battle res. Both mean the same thing. Essentially, a CR will be a resurrection of a friendly player during combat. Only certain classes have access to a CR, however, the cooldown is shared with the raid and so should be used very carefully. Cooldown. You should be familiar with what cooldown is, but there's a difference between your personal cooldowns and your raid cooldowns. A personal cooldown is something that applies to you and only you, and a raid cooldown is something that will affect the raid, like popping hero. Lust, time warp, or hero. Commonly referred to as popping hero, this is a raid-wide buff that when applied increases your haste by 30%. However, this is not to be used lightly and needs to be planned appropriately. It shares a 10-minute cooldown with the other hero abilities like Time Warp, Bloodlust, etc. And during that time, players who were previously affected by hero cannot benefit from it again until the 10 minutes is over. CC. This means crowd control, and it's where you use an ability to limit your target's ability to participate in a fight. You either have loss of control, for example, fear, hex, polymorph, or positional control, like a frost trap, imprison, a stun. During certain encounter mechanics, it's vital that you use CC on certain mobs where necessary. Interrupt. This means to cancel a spell being casted by your target. This is also called a kick. During an encounter, it's vital to interrupt spellcasting on certain mobs where necessary. However, not all spells being casted can be kicked. Raid markers. These are colored symbols that can either be placed directly onto a target or positioned around the map. The raid leader has access to do this, and it's used to help the raid understand where they need to position themselves and what mobs to target. Aggro. This is the attention that a mob has on you. The more aggro you have, the most attention the mob is paying to you. The mobs can only target one person at a time, however, and most of your abilities generate aggro or threat. It is the tank's job to maintain aggro on a target and nobody else's. Damage mitigation. You will have certain spells that when used will reduce the amount of damage taken. This is extremely useful when you are helping the raid with soaks, stacking, and AoE damage. Consumables. These are things that you bring to a raid in order to help you stay alive longer and deal more damage. Flasks are things that you consume once per hour that gives you a huge stat buff depending on your primary stats. Potions are one-time use and are instant effect. However, they have a 5-minute cooldown. Food is things that you consume before a fight which grants you a buff in a stat. Hopefully your primary stat, as different foods provides different buffs. Your food buff is called Well Fed, and this lasts for 1 hour or until you die. Armor kits are one-time use consumables that you place on your armor to grant yourself more health and finish after about 2 hours. Weapon oils are one-time use consumables like armor kits, except they provide an increase in damage on your weapons and last for 1 hour. Augment runes are similar to flasks and provide you with an increase in damage done and a reduction in damage taken. However, they are usually really expensive to buy, so most raid groups opt out of using them, as it's not worth the gold for the stat increase. You also have other forms of consumables that depend on your group composition, like health stones from a warlock. Pull. Pulling the boss means the beginning of the counter. Someone, hopefully the tank, will cast their ability first onto the boss, and that begins the fight. Before this happens though, a ready check will be initiated to ensure that everyone is ready to go, and a pull timer will count down so everyone is in sync. A pull timer also ensures that people can pre-cast their abilities that take a few seconds to channel. Hug. This is a public group in which you raid with. Pugs are great for solo players that want to try out the content but can't commit to a group or a guild. You will find pugs in the LFR interface or in the raid finder. Progression. This is where you're fighting a new boss in a raid. Attempting to kill that boss for the first time is considered progression. Curve. This stands for ahead of a curve, and it's an achievement awarded if you kill the last boss on heroic difficulty before the next tier, or raid, is released. People will use their curve to get themselves into groups, as it's quite a desirable thing to have. Add-ons. These are third-party programs that integrate into WoW's UI to give you a better quality of life when playing the game. There are some especially handy add-ons that you can install that will help you during your raids. These are DBM, or Big Wigs. This provides you with crucial information during encounter. GTFO. This alerts you if you're positioned in a way that will hurt you. Details, or Recount and SCADA. This provides handy information about you and your raid's performance. Weak auras. Similar to DBM and Bigwigs, this will enhance your gameplay with additional timers and alerts that are not always present in boss mods. So there you have it, a brief A to Z on commonly used raid terms while you're raiding. I really hope this video did help you guys, so do let me know in the comments if it did, and I'll carry on making things like this that will benefit those of you that are new to the game or getting back into it. If you haven't already, go and check out my beginner's guide to raiding. It is a longish video, about 20 minutes, but it hopefully includes everything that you need to know about raiding and answer any questions that you have about it. It also has some really good tips for those of you that are consistently raiding, so you might want to go and have a look anyway to see if you pick up anything extra. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and come and check me out on Twitch if you want to ask any questions on the fly. I stream every Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday and Wednesday from 12 until 6 UK time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a really great day. Bye!